Do not be alarmed. It's just a couple of guys. Who are these guys? Ray Regina, beloved former mayor of St. Charles, lifetime educator, and Pat Crimmins, a Geneva lawyer, but he's actually okay. From Elgin to Aurora, from Naperville to Elburn, these guys are gonna talk everything. So, here's Pat and Ray.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Just a Couple of Guys with your host, my partner, Pat Crimmins.
Pat Crimmins, happy to be here.
And yours truly, Ray Regina, in the last of 3 political podcasts. When I say political, we've been doing a series of countywide races. We've done the county board chair race. We've done the state's attorney's race. And today, Pat, we're breaking some new ground in the fact that we're going to talk to 2 judges up for, they're both judges, but they're running for a circuit court position. So it's an election, and this is the first time we've ever interviewed judges. And I would say, I'll go a little bit further and say that not very often that you see judges interviewed for an election. So I think we're breaking new ground here.
Yeah, and just the viewers should know there's certain questions we can't really ask of them. Certain opinions about the laws or, strategies or statutes.
And of course, like certainly cases that are before them.
Right, exactly. So we can't talk about those things. And this is kind of a unique situation also because there's not an incumbent and a challenger. You've got 2 associate judges running for a higher position known as a full circuit judge. So we have 2 judges running against each other. These 2 judges are similarly situated and are of the same, level, and they're running for a higher level. So there'll be a winner, and whoever that is, and then there'll be an opening, so that associate judgeship is going to have to be filled by the full circuit judges. So that's the process. And so we're clear, the geography of this is the 4th subcircuit. The county is cut into a variety of subcircuits. And this particular subcircuit is the 4th subcircuit.
And who are those electors? When I say that, cities.
We're talking about City of St. Charles, Batavia, and Geneva, basically. And this was Judge Hull's subcircuit before he retired. So they're running to fill that.
And so we're going to be talking to the Republican candidate, Judge David Clement, and the Democratic candidate, Judge Sandra Parga. And we're going to talk to both of them, and Pat has done a great job of crafting a number of questions, yes. And they've received those questions, correct?
That's right. We did send the questions to them in advance, particularly because this is kind of a sensitive situation. We don't want to put them in a bad position in certain questions. Although there is a Democrat and a Republican, I think we would all agree this isn't necessarily a political race in terms of the parties. This is a race for a position amongst 2 people that are already judges. So, okay. And the reason that I thought that we should do this is because I get calls as a lawyer all the time about, hey, I don't know who to vote for, especially now when you have the mail ballots. People
right.
are sitting down in their living room and they're saying, oh my gosh, I don't know these 2 people. So, unless you do something notorious, judges usually are unknown unless you're before them. So I get calls all the time, who should I vote for? Who should I vote for? And I try to be nice to everybody involved, but I do have opinions. But here, the viewers can be introduced to the judges and learn about the judges, their background, experience, and everything else.
So let's get to it. And so we're going to take a small break. And when we come back, we'll start with Judge David Clement. You stay tuned.
Want to save on some of the biggest names in streaming on the network made for streaming? X marks the spot. Now you can add the new Xfinity Stream Saver that includes Netflix, Peacock, and Apple TV+. That's Xfinity Stream Saver for just $15 a month. All your favorites, all in one place. Only from Xfinity. For more watching and less spending, X marks the spot. Do it all on the network made for streaming and bring on the good stuff.
And we're back now with the Honorable David Clement, Associate Judge currently at the 16th Judicial Circuit. And we appreciate your time. We know you're busy. It's election season. There's a variety of things going on. We appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
We wanted to talk a little bit about your background and experience. You know, as I indicated offline earlier, you know, as a lawyer, I get phone calls all the time about these judge races. And, you know, Pat, who should I vote for? And I try to be honest with everybody and say, you know, this is my experience. They're both X, Y, whatever. But people just don't get the opportunity to know the judges and meet the judges. So if you could tell us a little bit about your biography, your past employment before you became a judge, your education, your election website, which I assume will have more biographical information, the assignments that you've gone through as a judge, whether you've run for office previously, whether you're on any committees or appointments through the Supreme Court.
All right, well, my experience, it's a long question.
Sure.
This November, I will have been sworn in as a lawyer for 40 years. I started as an intern, my legal career as an intern with the State Attorney's Office. That lasted for a year. Then I went to a private firm for about 7 months, and in July of 1985, I started a private practice with my wife, Claudia. And we practiced together until 1994 when I was selected to be the Kane County Public Defender, which is an office I held for 16 years and 23 days. And on December 23rd, 2010, I was sworn in as an associate judge, which is how I've served ever since. I went to college at Illinois State University.
You like that Redbird?
A lot of Redbirds.
And the Jersey.
Yeah.
I went to law school at Northern Illinois University College of Law, graduated in 1984. And the other question, have I run for office before? Yes, in 2018, I ran in the primary for a circuit judge position, myself and 2 others. I did not win the primary. The winner of that primary was ultimately lost to the Democratic candidate that year, and I am running again this year.
Any appointments or committee assignments to the Supreme Court or
Not through the
locally?
Supreme Court. Locally, yes. I've served, especially during COVID. I was part of the group that figured out how to keep the courthouse open. We met on Saturday mornings, primarily at Potawatomi in one of the meeting rooms there, and we talked about how to do court. You can't have criminal defendants who are accused of a crime and presumed innocent sitting in jail till COVID's over. So we had to have court every single day. We had to have bond court. Back then it was bond court every single day. So we worked out the mechanism to do that. I was one of the first, if not the first, to do a jury trial after COVID was over. And that's just a matter of luck of the draw. It I had a guy ready and we had one room to do it in. I was part of the committee when the Public Safety Act went into effect. As it was approaching, my job was to figure out who would be in jail if the Public Safety Act started today, who could not be in jail once the act was effective.
Right.
That was a pretty easy job. That was a low-hanging fruit. You know, those are pretty obvious individuals.
Let me talk a little bit more specifically in the details here, that before you were appointed public defender, and by the way, that appointment comes from the judiciary, is that right?
Yes, the circuit judges appoint the public defender.
Before you became public defender, what was your experience? Was it just limited to criminal, or did you do other things?
No, did many other things. And I forget these things. I looked back at it the last time I ran. I spent a lot of time in family court. I didn't do any, I did a lot of divorce cases. I did civil trials. I did law division jury trials. I did a lot of Secretary of State hearings, but I always loved the criminal work. I learned that when I was an intern with the State Attorney's Office. Only when I was an intern there, I realized I liked the defense side more than I liked the prosecution side. And in 1989, I was named a conflict counsel with the county.
That's right.
And what that means is if the public defenders has one or more, or 2 or more defendants they represent, and there's a conflict, they went to the defense, to the conflict counsel, of which I was one of, at that time, I think 4. And during that time, I did my first 2 death penalty trials, and I was conflict attorney. Had a caseload of, I think, around 140 when I gave it up after I became public defender.
And then, if I may, let's just finish this up. After
Did you
you,
let me talk?
yeah,
He's like that sometimes.
after you were appointed judge, you received various assignments as well.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I started out in the Elgin Branch Court. I spent 10 months up there. The branch courts are kind of traditionally the training ground for judges. You're expected to know the law when you become a judge. And I like to think that I did, but you have to learn how to act like a judge, which is not a natural thing for many people. So I started in the Elgin Branch Court, spent 10 months up there. Then I came down to the main courthouse where I was, for a while, I was the special assignment judge, which means I sat in all the courtrooms covering for judges who were either on vacation or otherwise unavailable. I sat in a civil division, all the branch courts. I sat in felony courtrooms. I sat in misdemeanor courtrooms. I sat in the domestic violence courtrooms, all the courtrooms when I was the special assignment judge. And then I spent 3 years in divorce court. And then they moved me up in 2015 to my current position in felonies.
And finally, your website for people who want more information.
𝐿ECTJudgeClement.com.
Thank you. Right?
Judge, my first question is an education question for our audience more than anything else. You're a Republican running against Democrat Sandra Parga, but both of you are judges. So the first question is, why is one judge running against another judge?
Well, I can't say why she's running. I know that she believes she's qualified for this circuit judge
Well, that's
position.
what I guess we're getting at.
Yeah.
You're running. You're both judges in the system, but
Right. I feel I bring a lot of experience, leadership ability, and so forth to the circuit judge position, which is what makes it different from an associate judge.
that's my second question. The difference between an associate judge and a full circuit judge.
Right. I mentioned earlier that the circuits pick the public defender. They also pick all the associate judges. They make all the general rules that govern our court system at the local level. I'm not talking about Supreme Court rules, but they govern the local rules. And they make the local rules, sign off on general orders on how we run the courthouse and so forth. Act as mentors to the other judges. I have, over the years I've been doing this, I've often other judges come to me with questions, particularly in criminal cases, because I have as much experience as just about anybody in criminal cases now, criminal law. So I bring that leadership and the experience that I think my opponent doesn't have. She doesn't have my experience, certainly not in criminal law. She worked for me. I hired her, I think, for her first job at the public defender's office way back when. I don't remember when that was.
Do you believe? I mean, do you believe that judges should be appointed? Some judges, all judges, appointed, elected, or is there some other method? This is just maybe a personal question, but personal philosophy, but it deals with just a judge attaining the bench. What are your thoughts?
I've thought a lot about the question, having run now twice. I think the way associate judges are picked is fine. I think that there are examples, many examples of very good judges who are appointed as associate judges. The method for selecting circuit judges is entirely political. In the race that I ran in 2018, the winner on the Republican side was the former chairman of the Republican Party in Kane County, and the winner on the Democratic side was a former Democratic state senator, and he ultimately won the election. So in my opinion, those were not the two best qualified candidates in that election, and one of them now is a circuit judge. And that's me personally thinking I was better qualified than both of them. Have I thought of a better way to do it? To take the politics out of it, if you put a committee together to do it, then the committee is, political and biased in some way potentially. So I have not thought of a better way to do it. I know that there was a state on the East Coast, I want to say it was New Jersey, that used to have a nonpartisan way of selecting their judges. Then they went away from that, and now they're elected.
And one final point relative to the election of judges, and that would be simply, if you win this election and you become a circuit judge, that first of all, that term is for what, a period of 6 years?
6 years, and then you run for retention.
Then you run for retention.
Yes.
You don't have to run against anyone. You're basically running against yourself.
Correct.
To retain your spot.
Correct. It's a yes, no, you have to have 60% of the ballot,
All right.
of the votes. There's 4 judges right now on the November ballot running for retention.
Right.
And this race that you're in is the only race between candidates.
Correct.
That's correct. One of the things that I stress to people that ask me questions about candidates and vacancies is the way they manage their courtroom, their demeanor, and whether they do the work. Read the law, read the pleadings, that kind of thing. How would you describe your courtroom management style? If you can answer that.
Yes, I can answer that.
Sure.
Being in court, especially for the people who are there every day, the assistant state's attorneys and the assistant public defenders, can be very stressful. There's a lot of pull on their time. They have a lot of people to talk to, not so much the state. Their problem now is they have to be in different courtrooms, many of them at the same time. I'm very patient with that. I wait for them to get back to my courtroom. The public defenders, there's usually 3 of them in there. They have to be in the hallway talking to somebody. They have to be in the lockup talking to somebody. They have to be in front of me, and each have their own assigned cases. So I try to give them a long leash.
Right.
As long as we're getting something done, then I'm very patient. They're always prepared. So I like to think my management style is a little bit hands off. In terms of reading the pleadings, being familiar with all the files, I go through all the files the day before. It's on the screen. See what the case is up for. If there's anything of note, I write it down. If it's just another status date, then I just let it go.
Yeah.
And then I have a calendar system kind of in my head. When we get to a certain point in a case, depending on the type of case it is, it's time to start thinking about setting it for trial or resolving it somehow. And they all know what that is, and they all know when I say it's for plea or setting the first time, it's not likely to get set that first time, but the second time it is likely to be set. So yeah, kind of hands off in terms of management style until I need to be hands on, and then I'm very hands on.
And one of the things I always talk to people about is she's the type of judge that doesn't forget what it was like to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're describing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've never raised my voice at anybody in the courtroom other than a defendant, and that's happened more than once, just to be heard over them raising their voice to me.
Right.
But I don't yell at the lawyers. I mean, that's so counterproductive.
Right.
Gets nothing done, accomplishes nothing.
Well, the Illinois State Bar Association is a bar association that oversees the lawyers and the judges, I guess, to some extent. And they have a rating system or ranking system. If you could tell the folks a little bit about that, and then how are the judges ranked, and then your rankings, if you received them already, from the most recent vote.
Can I look at my notes?
Sure, notes are welcome.
Because there are categories, and I don't want to misstate the categories.
Sure.
So these are the results of the advisory poll for me. It talks about that there's an overall number, meets the requirements of office, then integrity, impartiality, legal ability, temperament, court management, health, sensitivity, and then of course a number of respondents. Meets the requirements of office. I mean, I scored well in all these. I think these are very subjective rankings.
Sure. And the terms aren't defined, are they?
No, they're not.
So,
they're not defined.
Yeah.
And the number, you have to have appeared. The lawyers who answered the survey have to have appeared in front of the judge, I think, within the last 24 months.
Right.
And again, that's in a criminal court, and even for Judge Parga in the juvenile court where she sits, an even smaller group of people. She had a total of 153, and I had 185 people respond, and that's out of many more than that were sent out. And the judges have nothing to do with who gets those. To be clear, we don't send them to our friends and relatives. So I'm pleased with my ratings. I do look at these. Like my lowest ranking is temperament, 90%. I don't think I'm real crabby, but apparently some people do.
Well,
So,
sometimes we
I'll
don't
work
have
on
the
that.
vivacious personality that can be confused for temper.
Yeah, maybe.
Right? Yeah, you're just who you are.
But meets the requirements for office, legal ability. I'm very happy with all those numbers, especially in compared to Judge Parga's numbers. So
Now, where can we find these if we want to do some research? Do we go into the ISBA
Yes,
website?
the ISBA website, and go to look at the Hull vacancy. We are both running for Judge Clint Hull's vacancy since he's retired.
He was kind enough to retire.
He's kind enough to retire.
Okay.
Actually, I don't know how this would have worked, but his residence is no longer in his subcircuit.
Right.
I imagine he would have been grandfathered in. I don't think they'd kick him out, but that's basically St. Charles, Geneva, and Batavia.
Yeah, that's the question I did want to ask. Back to your bio, I guess. With respect to the 4th Subcircuit, my understanding is the majority of it's St. Charles, with a little St. Charles, or Batavia and Geneva.
No, it's all Batavia, all Geneva.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's maybe a couple precincts in Geneva that are on the far west side that are out, but no, it's all of Batavia, all of Geneva, and all of St. Charles, a little bit of North Aurora, and a little bit of South Elgin, and even some Elgin precincts are in there.
All right, that's what I was confused by. Now, I wanted to, back to your bio, talk a little bit about your residency within the Subcircuit. You're from St. Charles, right?
I'm not originally from St. Charles.
Right.
I've lived in St. Charles for 40 years.
Right.
Yes, I've lived here since we lived 1 year in Geneva when we first got married, and then we moved to St. Charles, and I've been in St. Charles ever since.
Yeah. And your wife is from St. Charles?
Wife is from St. Charles. All our kids went to grade school in St. Charles. They went to high school at different schools, Marmion and Bennett. Claudia's family, her 4 sisters and brother, all went to high school and grade school in St. Charles. Her father he owned a manufacturing, well, he's president of a manufacturing concern, Applied Composites, I think it was called, although it's gone through a couple things over the years.
And you married a lawyer.
Yes, my wife is also a lawyer.
I've done that myself, and does that cause you any stresses, or does that cause you any difficulty?
Not her being a lawyer.
Okay.
And my daughter's also a lawyer.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
my daughter's an assistant state's attorney.
Very nice.
So that's very good at work. I don't have to see either one of them. They can't appear in front of me.
Pat and I enjoy races that are civil in nature, and we try to espouse that when we ask questions and so on. So the question is pretty simple. Can you tell us something that you like about your opponent?
I think she's a very good judge. I think she's a very good person. There's nothing I dislike about Judge Parga. I just feel that I'm the better qualified candidate in this race. And in terms of, I haven't heard of her saying anything about me, and I certainly haven't said anything about her.
That's admirable.
Yeah, we're just both, I think, doing our thing with our respective potential voters and see how the general goes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but although you're affiliated with a political party here, this isn't really a political race, right?
Not for me.
I mean, it's really more about your background and experience.
Yes.
And things of that nature.
And it really, if the one thing they could change about judicial elections would take the politics out of it, you don't have to associate with a party, that would be the thing to do.
We have a series of questions here about the issues and whether you and your opponent disagree as it relates to anything and specifically. And I don't know that you can answer that question, but the question was well crafted. I know that.
What issues?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a difficult question. We'll strike that question. Withdraw that question, Your Honor. We did want to talk about generally the courthouse and how it functions. There's some talk of monies and resources and things of that nature. Do you feel you have enough resources to function efficiently in your courtroom or as the courthouse generally? And what are your thoughts on that?
We could function more efficiently with more resources. The resources that are lacking for me, for instance, a diagnostic center.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a while to get things done through the diagnostic center, sometimes through probation, just because they don't have the manpower. There's wait lists for everything. Mental health facilities in the state of Illinois are sorely lacking in beds because if someone is found unfit for whatever reason, there are statutory timeframes during which they should be removed from the jail and placed into treatment, and they are never there within those times. And we get letters from, we have X number of beds, we have X number of people on a wait list, it's gonna be X number of weeks before we can get your guy in.
That was my question, is to your point, and that is it your decision that somebody comes in with a petition that says, I want my client out of jail because they're, I don't want to use the word crazy, but there's a mental health issue, and is it your decision to move them from X to Y?
The lawyers crafted or talk of it a little more subtly than that. They raise a bona fide doubt as to the defendant's fitness.
Right.
The court can also raise a bona fide doubt as to a defendant's fitness, but the one who's most likely to do so would be the defense lawyer who spends the most time with them. And then we send them to the diagnostic center for a fitness evaluation. And if they're found unfit, then there's a treatment plan put into place. If they can be restored within a year, it's one type of plan. If they don't think they can be restored within a year, it's another type of plan. I order the fitness evaluation and I order the placement, but the placement has to come and get them, and they can't come and get them unless they have the room. And that's where we run into problems.
That's your
Yeah.
issue.
Whose budget is that? Is that the chief judge's budget?
No.
Who's-
Not the placement, that would be the state of Illinois.
Okay, what about the diagnostics?
Diagnostic center does come from the chief judge's budget.
Okay,
Or
so-
from the county's budget. I think it falls under the chief judge's
Okay,
purview.
so that would fall under the umbrella of public safety.
Yes.
And it's my understanding, and maybe you can comment on this or not, but there's a mental health crisis out there. So I would imagine that these services are more required now than they have been in the past.
Yes.
Right.
And I agree with your point based on the number of people who come in front of me now who are clearly in need of mental health treatment.
Right. But in terms of facilities and things of that nature, your resources, you think are sufficient at this point?
Well,
Technology?
They're outdated. Technology, they're in the process of upgrading. My understanding is the funding is there for that to happen. It's just a matter of it actually taking place, and they did a lot, then they stopped, and now it looks like they're doing it again. So we'll see. The newest technology in our building is in courtroom 007, which is Judge Campbell's courtroom where he hears orders of protection, and also in the new juvenile courtroom, which was where Judge Pargas sits, where you don't have, we use something called the OWL, which is a looks like this. Looks like a bottle. Stands in front of me. It's got a camera that goes 360 degrees, a microphone that goes 360 degrees. Works more times than it doesn't, but it requires a huge television screen on the floor, me looking at a computer. They're going to do away with all those cameras. They're going to do away with all the microphones. They've hung something in the middle of the ceiling that they say is a microphone. It looks like a giant shower head. But none of that's hooked up. They took out a lot of the TV screens and put new ones in where Zoom will be so everyone can see from one place. But they had wiring issues, as I understand it, getting the wiring done.
Outside of being a judge, I don't know if you have an obligation to be involved in the community, but I would imagine you are involved to some extent in the community.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I do different programs, not a lot, not as many as I used to, but recently I was at Geneva High School with a business law class. We went there a couple mornings in a row to talk. Anderson Animal Shelter had a walk for dogs. I've done things with Anderson before. I don't usually post any of it on Facebook or anywhere. I just go and do it. We volunteer there, and I have dropped off, food and blankets and all that kind of stuff.
You are a dog person.
Yes, we have dogs. We have dogs.
On this point, I was going to ask the judge a question about the judiciary branch. You think of the three branches of government, that the judiciary is probably the most clandestine of the three.
Right.
And I guess the follow-up to that would be, is there any way, I know there's a lot of stuff that's private, privileged information, obviously, but is there any way that it can be better? I mean, it just seems like people I talk to say, I don't understand the court system. Stuff's too clandestine.
Well, getting out and talking to people. I mean, that's the best way to do it, is to get out and talk to people. My fear with not a lot of things, I don't want to make it sound like I'm paranoid about this, but the more you do outside of the system, if you will, the more opportunity you have to create conflicts of interest. Right. Political endorsements are a good example of that. This has not happened, and I would not expect it to happen. But let's say the state's attorney endorsed me as a judge. Now that would, on the face of it, create a conflict of interest,
Yes.
because I hear criminal cases and she's the chief prosecutor in the county.
Right.
So I'm careful about that. I'm careful about the groups I talk to. There was a group that wanted me to speak. I looked up what they are, and I do not share their views. And I didn't want to have a picture with them associated with their views. So judges have to be careful.
You kind of walked me into my last question. That is that, it's pretty clear, I think, especially with all the news that's going on, that judges are, at least here in Illinois, are certainly guided by rules of ethics. The Supreme Court sets down the rules of ethics and so on.
Absolutely.
What's your position on that concept of rules of ethics being applied, let's say at the higher levels, particularly the Supreme Court of the United States?
I do not know why they would be any different for any judge.
All right.
I do not know why they would be subject to any different rules than we are subject to. The rules are not fair, not unfair, I mean, not unfair. They are not onerous. 99% of them are simple common sense. I don't know why anyone would not agree to be bound by those rules.
You're espousing a universal standard of ethics.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can't take Dave on my yacht and travel around a
Right.
trip to France and then appear in front of him. I couldn't do that in Illinois.
And there are examples that have happened. I was in divorce court. Somebody wanted to take me to the football game, the Bears game.
Right.
And he had a case pending in front of me.
Right.
It's an easy no thank you. Easy no thank you.
Very good. Well, we're going to let you now, in the home stretch here, have an opportunity simply to talk to the audience and, tell them why they should vote for you.
Give us your website again real quick, too.
It's electjudgeclement.com, www.electjudgeclement.com. There's a Facebook page out there, Elect Judge Clement. They all have different kinds of information on it. The reason, it's my experience, the people in the state of Illinois, you pay my salary. And my salary is substantial, and I'm grateful for that. And I work every day as hard as I can to earn it. I work nights sometimes, weekends when I have to, but that's less now that I'm a judge than when I was a lawyer. But you pay my salary, and when I was a public defender, hiring people was all about the bang for your buck. How much experience can I get for the money I have to pay? And with me, you get 40 years of experience, and you get a good solid, at this point, 30 of it doing the criminal work that I'm doing right now. And there aren't many people who have that kind of experience. So those are the main reasons I think you should vote for me. I'm available to the public. I go to work every day. Don't ever work from home, even when the opportunity is available. I believe that if somebody from the public needs to speak to a judge, and obviously in the courtroom on the record, nothing off the record, but I should be able to come out and talk to whoever that is. So that's my reason. That's why I'm running. I've started public service, in my mind, back in 1989 when I became a conflict lawyer. I've been in public service my entire legal career for the most part, and I want to continue that as a circuit judge before I finally, at some point, retire.
Judge, we want to thank you so much for coming here. We thought, Pat brought the idea of interviewing judges that are running on a circuit, for a circuit position, and I think you displayed a reason why it was a good idea.
Anything to save my cell phone calls. You know what I mean?
We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Judge,
Thanks for
I
having me.
appreciate it.
Judge David Clement of the 16th Circuit here in Kane County in Illinois, and we're going to take a small break. We come back, we're going to talk to the judge's opponent, Democrat Sandra Parga. You stay tuned.
right, we are back with our second candidate for the big race of the 4th Subcircuit, Judge Sandra Parga. Thank you very much for coming today. We appreciate your time.
Judge, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
We know how busy you are out there knocking on doors and such, right?
I am out there, yes.
Yes.
Knocking on doors, 2,000 plus so far.
Well,
Not that I'm counting.
I thought when I ran for alderman, I knocked on 500 doors. That was a lot. 2,000. Oh my God. All right.
So one of the things that we're doing here is so that you have an opportunity to introduce yourself to voters and our viewers, so that they don't call me and say, should I vote for her in this judge race? Because as you were a lawyer once, you get those calls all the time, because people generally don't know. Unless they've had a traffic ticket or they've been in front of you for something, they really don't know who they should vote for. So this is the opportunity we thought was appropriate to give both candidates a chance to introduce themselves. So we'd like to talk to you a little bit about your biography, your past employment before you became a judge, your educational background, your judicial assignments after you became a judge, whether you ran for office previously, and whether you have been appointed to anything by the Supreme Court or any committee assignments above and beyond your judicial assignments. Now that's a big question, and we expect that you can answer that. We also would like your campaign website for the people.
All right, well, my campaign website, Judge Sandra Parga, is my Instagram, judgeparga.com, and campaign at judgeparga.com.
Okay, very exciting. And we can use those websites to find out more about you.
Absolutely.
If you can't, in your 58-minute rendition of your biography, tell us everything we need to know. So yeah, if you would, tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I graduated from law school in 1994 from Cornell Law School in Ithaca. I went to DePaul University undergrad. I graduated in 3 years and then got a scholarship to go out to Cornell. Had never left the state of Illinois before going out to law school. I lived at home during college and commuted, so that was a big jump for me to leave the state and my home for the first time at law school. And then came back. I wanted to really do some form of legal services. So came back home, my thought was I was going to work, in Chicago for legal services, but ended up getting a job at Prairie State Legal Services here in St. Charles when they were still here. So I worked there for about 2.5 years. Then I went to the public defender's office here in Kane County. And I was there for a couple of years before going into private practice at 𝐂𝐚𝐳. And then I spent 23 years at 𝐂𝐚𝐳, and I kind of incorporated all of the work I had done before. I did some family law, I did some criminal defense work, I did administrative hearings, I served as a guardian ad litem for kids, I served as a guardian ad litem for seniors. Just did a lot of different things in my private practice. I ended up being the managing attorney at our 𝐿GEN office, which I really enjoyed doing and very much serving the community there. Mm-hmm. And then was appointed to the bench in 2017.
Okay, so you've been an associate for approximately 7 years?
Yes.
During that time, you've been assigned various places. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I started out in traffic court at the Aurora Branch Court. I was there for about a year, then went up to 𝐿GEN, to the 𝐿GEN Branch Court. After that assignment, I was a special assignment judge, which means I fill in and serve for judges who are on vacation, who are absent, who need a little extra help. That gave me the chance to work both in our civil courts and in our criminal courts and in our juvenile courts, so did a little bit of everything. After that, I was assigned to the juvenile justice courtroom, and I've been there for the last 4 years.
And just so the folks understand, what does that mean necessarily?
So
go ahead.
Here in Kane County, we have 2 judges who hear juvenile cases. Judge Karianis hears our abuse and neglect cases, so children who are have been abused, neglected, who are dependent, and their parents are really the focus of those cases. I hear our juvenile justice cases, so I work with those kids in our criminal justice system. And sadly, those are often our kids who have been in our abuse and neglect case. So Kane County is really unique in that we are the only circuit in the state that has one judge hear our duly involved cases for those children. So I'm the judge who will hear both the abuse and neglect and the juvenile justice case when kids have two open cases, are involved in both.
Right.
So that's part of my call. I hear adoptions twice a month, private adoptions, which is great. I hear our truancy cases, that's also a part of my call. And so that's where my work has been for the last 4 years.
Okay, and then with respect to the Supreme Court or any internal appointments, are you in any committees or anything that the Supreme Court's involved in or anything like that?
Yes, I have been very involved since I became a judge. So I serve as a new judge mentor. I serve as a peer mentor to other judges when issues come up. I am on the board of the Illinois Judges Association. I serve as the secretary of the Illinois Latino Judges Association. I was appointed by the Supreme Court to the Board of Trustees for the Judicial College. I serve as co-chair of the Language Access Committee for the state. I was appointed to that position. I also serve as faculty for the College of Judicial Education, so helping to teach other justice partners and judges every 2 years at our conference. I'm the past co-chair of our new judges organization, the past co-chair of our biennial juvenile conference, the past co-chair of the past chair of our juvenile justice committee for the state.
So running for full circuit judge means that you don't have somebody chair work. You get away from this a little bit?
No, so I actually am no longer the chair of those other committees because when I was appointed to the board, we oversee all 7 committees for the college.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could no longer serve as chair and co-chair for those committees.
I understand. And then just a little bit, if we could, about your personal background and your residency in the 4th Subcircuit.
Yeah, so I am not originally from St. Charles. I grew up in Woodridge, mostly, and then came out here after law school in 1994, but I've lived in St. Charles since 1994. I've raised my family here, and this has really been the longest place I've ever lived, and this is my home. So I very much love St. Charles. I think we're so fortunate to live in such a great area.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start my questioning here a little bit different than I did last time. I was just starting to ask the simple question. You're in a political race here. You're the Democrat running against Judge Clement, who's a Republican. Do you think judges should be appointed? Think judges should be elected? Or is there some other means that judges should go to be appointed to a bench?
So when we are appointed as associates, we go through a pretty extensive vetting system. There's a 12 to 14 page application we have to fill out. We have to give references of other lawyers that we have worked with, other judges who have seen our work, and calls are made to the references we put down. And I think that's a good system because those are the people who have worked with you. They know the class of work that you do, what kind of attorney you are, your level of integrity, earnestness, work ethic. And I think when we elect judges, our electorate, what I have found out from knocking on all those doors is that most people don't know who the judges are or
That's
how
why we're
we
here,
work.
right?
Yes, exactly. And so I think it would be great if there could be some form of vetting system as well for judges when they're elected, so that people have the information that they're missing when they go to the voting booth. Because unless they've been in your courtroom or they know a lawyer, they don't know who the judges are.
You are in a political race, and so my follow-up question would be, do you find it to be difficult? You're a judge, and you're running against a judge. So talk to me about that.
Well, I have enjoyed going to the doors because I feel like people are surprised to see me, the candidate, there. And so that's been nice because I get exactly that response. Never met a judge, don't know who the judges are. I skip it because I don't know, or, I have to ask a friend or a neighbor. In terms of running against another judge, I think sometimes it can be awkward for our coworkers. I think, everyone wants to remain impartial. We're,
Right.
very collegial with each other. And so in that sense, it's sometimes awkward. I think in this particular situation, because I'm in a completely separate building, it's a little less awkward. We don't see each other often, and we've both talked about how we wanted this to be a very civil race, and that's what it's been. It really has truly been a civil race.
And Pat, she set me up for the clandestine question, and she really articulated the fact that you knocked on $2,000. You're working toward knocking that barrier down. But as a whole, the three branches of government, executive, legislative, and the judiciary, do you feel that the judiciary is somewhat clandestine? There's reasons why it has to be in certain situations, privy on certain relationships and information and so on. But in general, don't you find that the judicial branch is the most clandestine of our three branches?
I think it can be. I think there has been a mentality that we need to be very removed from our communities, and I think that is starting to change, and I think our Illinois Supreme Court very much encourages us now as judges to get out into the community,
Okay.
and so that we aren't as mysterious, so that people know who we are, and to bring that trust back into the judiciary so that they can see we are people too, and that we are involved in our
I
communities.
have a bumper sticker
and
that's judges are people too.
Judges are people too. Look, yeah, there you go.
Now, I don't know if you asked this, Ray, but the difference, if you would articulate for us, the difference between being an associate judge and a full circuit judge is what?
So associate judges, as I said earlier, are appointed by the circuit judges who are elected by the voters. The circuit judges and the associate judges can hear all the same types of cases: civil, criminal, felonies, misdemeanors. The difference really comes in the additional responsibilities that circuit judges have. For example, appointing our chief public defender, appointing our chief probation officer. And I feel like our circuit judges are really the people who are the most responsible for implementing policies that affect the culture of our courtrooms and policies that affect our courtrooms.
Pat,
So-
just to reiterate on that, in your question,
Sure.
if you were to win this race, that's a 6-year term, and then if you were to run again, it would be running for retention.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And people should know there are judges running for retention, but that's exclusive of this race, which is an actual race.
Yes,
And this race doesn't have an incumbent and a challenger. It's just the two of you who happen to both be associate judges.
yes.
But you could have a situation where you're running as an associate and some lawyer is running against you, not a judge, and you're both running for that position.
Absolutely.
So, in other words, you're running for full circuit, not for the better looking robes, and not for the higher pay grade. You're running because you want a seat at the table to be involved in the administration of justice within the 16th Judicial Circuit.
That's exactly it. I really believe that the role of a circuit is to help shape those policies and that culture. And I've started to do that work as an associate, but that's a voice I don't have and a seat I don't have at the table unless I'm a circuit judge.
Would it necessarily involve, if you were to win, involve a reassignment?
Not necessarily. So I think traditionally the circuit judges do have a preference or are given a preference for what assignment they would like. And as associates, we're definitely consulted, but we go where we are assigned.
I understand. Okay, so one of the questions I wrote down here and that we gave you ahead of time was to discuss your courtroom management style. And by that, I think, everybody understands the cranky judge, the mean judge, the overly friendly judge. Tell us a little bit about your style.
So in juvenile court, I really feel like it's a problem-solving type of court. We are really there to balance safety and consequences for the kids with finding support to keep them out of the adult system and to keep them from coming back into juvenile court. And so to that end, we really collaborate with service providers, whether it be mental health providers, the Department of Children and Family Services, court services. And Zoom has really helped me do that because they don't have to take time out to come to the courtroom. I have a hybrid courtroom that I run every day. And so they jump on Zoom, they're in the courtroom with me, and we are all talking about the kids together, what's gone well, what needs to go better, and we're working together. The other thing that juvenile court has really taught me, and that I have impressed upon new judges when I was co-chairing that committee, is using plain language for people in court. So I am trying to explain to kids their constitutional rights, their charges, and you have to do it in a way that kids understand. And so that means I have to speak to them plainly. I avoid the legalese as much as I can, but I think it's a lesson that's good for judges all across the board, that we speak to people plainly so they know what happened to their case, they understand what we want them to do, what they need to do, and I think also that there is this sense that they were heard. And in juvenile court, there is a lot of listening, not just to the kids, but to their parents, right? What's going on in the home? How do we help you? What do you see? They know their kids best. And a lot of time it's a lot of venting also. They're upset, they're frustrated, and so listening is a big tool for me.
I'm listening to this conversation, and I want to ask you the question of whether or not in juvenile court as opposed to adult court, you find that there has to be a measure between rehabilitation and punishment. I mean, those two seem to be in conflict a lot of times, particularly in serious offenses that have still been remanded to the juvenile court.
I think in adult court it is, you have your category of people who are in the system because of mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and we have programs in court that address those issues, and I think we try to carve them out for that very reason. And then you have offenses and people who are committing offenses who the focus really does need to be more on punishment. And so it's knowing how to identify, and I think you get that help from the lawyers. That's why there's different specialty courts as well to help us sort people into those categories.
The Illinois State Bar Association, which guides lawyers and helps judges, I think, has a system of ratings and rankings and questionnaires and polling, etc. You participated in that as a candidate, is that
Yes.
correct? Is that the only time that you participate in that as a candidate, or are you ranked or rated as you're sitting?
No, so I am ranked and rated as I'm sitting. I did participate in the those rankings for the Illinois State Bar Association, but a couple of years ago, it was right around COVID or after, we get randomly selected
Right.
for an evaluation, and you have to provide, I think, about 100 or so names of practicing attorneys and staff, courtroom staff, and just a variety of different people who are familiar with you in the courtroom, and they are sent surveys to be, to evaluate you. And so I did have that evaluation a few years ago, and then you sit down and you review you have an evaluation with another judge, and so I had that as well.
Okay, so as it relates to the race between yourself and Judge Clement, you were rated.
Yes.
How did we do?
Recommended.
Recommended, which means what?
So you can either be not recommended or recommended. There's only two categories. I was recommended, and you get rated on your demeanor in court, your court management style, your legal ability, your health. There's a couple of other categories I can't think of off the top of my head, but it's about 5 or 6 categories you get rated on, and then based on your score, you are either recommended or not recommended.
The categories are not themselves defined necessarily, are they?
Not really, they're pretty general. Yeah.
So you have a bunch of lawyers who are looking through it and trying to decide what's best, and they give you ratings and rankings, and it's kind of a guide
Yes.
for the average voter. They don't have to adopt it, but it's certainly helpful. Right.
I was going to say, Pat and I we've done this with all our interviewees. We like to see a race that's professional and support. People are not throwing stones at each other. We see it at the national level, and to me it's despicable. So the question is very simple. Tell me something good about your opponent.
He's a great colleague. Whenever someone needs help, he is, he offers help, so he's a great person to work with. I think he has a great sense of humor, and I think he's a good judge.
Okay. Are there issues that you disagree with him about that you can talk about? Not necessarily in the law, in the weeds of the law, the details of the law, and things like that, but just other issues that you might disagree with him about.
Well, I've never had that specific discussion with him, but I would think that one disagreement we might have is the role of the circuit court judge. To me, it requires you to be involved in the system. and involved in bettering the system. And I think not just with the committees I'm on now on a statewide level, but even locally, having jumped in during the pandemic and, being the principal author of our Zoom manual that later got adopted, or taking the lead on our language access program in Kane County to make it better. I think being a circuit court judge requires more than just handling our caseload in the courtroom. It requires really getting involved and looking around to see how to make our system
And we
better.
talked a little bit about community outreach, and you said that that's being encouraged by the Illinois Supreme Court to get out there, meet people, maybe answer questions. Are you engaged in that process?
Absolutely. So I am one of the judges who does the Worries of the World Wide Web at our schools. So we go to different middle schools to present exactly that topic, what kids should be on the lookout for. I've really pushed to have a parent component for that as well, because I think the parents are the front line and they need to know the worries and dangers of their kids being on social media. And so we've started to incorporate a parent component locally here in St. Charles and the Tri-Cities. I also have been a volunteer with Lazarus House for many years, bringing lunches or breakfasts to Lazarus House. I have volunteered with the Fox Valley Literacy. I had a student teaching her English with the Boys and Girls Club in South Elgin. So yes, very involved in our community.
That's great. Now I wanted to get back to our original question here. I don't think you mentioned, you did run for this job before previously, correct?
I think about 20 some years ago.
Yeah, and Judge Clement ran for the job as well previously, I think.
I think so.
That's right. So you have that in common.
Yes.
And you both married lawyers,
Yes.
which I think you both have in common.
Yes.
That's good.
In my research, I know that you, Judge Clement, and all the judges here in Illinois are guided by a strict, very strict, and I find to be very thorough set of rules on ethics. And my question is pretty simple, but it emanates from some of the controversy we see at the higher levels, and that is, do you believe the strict rules of ethics that you are abide by here in Illinois, should that be a little bit more universal at the higher levels of court, and let's say all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court?
I think it applies to everybody but our U.S. Supreme Court. All of the judges on the state level and the federal level have a code of judicial ethics, but for our U.S. Supreme Court, and yes, I do think we should all have the same code of ethics.
And we're clear that if I asked you on my yacht to go to a certain junket somewhere, that would be a violation of the rules that you are now guided by, but were not violations apparently in the Supreme Court.
That's how it appears.
As I read those rules, I looked at them, and as I read those rules, there are strict ethics rules even regarding running for office.
Oh, absolutely. There are strict rules regarding running for office, what we're allowed to do. We cannot solicit funds. We can't know who contributes to our campaign or doesn't contribute to our campaign. There needs to be a wall. What we can participate in politically if we are not running is limited. And so, yes, there are many rules that we are bound by.
And party politics as well, right?
Yes, correct.
I think it's been very thorough. We've covered a lot of ground here, and I think it's time for us to back off and let you talk to our audience a bit and tell them why you deserve to be elected as circuit court judge here.
Give them that website again, too.
Sure. So it's campaign@judgeparga.com, or judgeparga.com is my Facebook, and Judge Sandra Parga on Instagram. And so I hope that I can earn everyone's vote. I don't know that I would ever use the word deserving, but I want to work hard and earn everyone's vote and support this election, because I do believe that being a circuit court judge is about serving our community and looking to see how we make our system better for the litigants, not for the judges, but for the people who come into our courtroom, the lawyers, the people who are there to do the work. And so I believe in always working hard and looking to see how to make the system better. I've been doing that as an associate. I intend to continue to do that, and I really hope to have a seat at the table so that I can continue to impact and influence the culture and policies that we have in our courtrooms.
Pat and I are really happy that we're able to bring interviews with judges to our audience. And we would say simply that we appreciate wholeheartedly your participation. We thank you immensely for coming here today.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you
you.
both.
Thank
I
you very
appreciate
much.
the opportunity. This was fun.
You're welcome. All right, that's Judge Sandra Parga, and we're going to take a small commercial break, and then Pat and I'll be back for some closing remarks after these words. You stay tuned. Hello, friends. This is Ray Rogina. Are you looking for the place to be? Voted best live music and entertainment venue by the Daily Herald in 2023? That would be Old Republic in Elgin, an indoor-outdoor hub with classic American eats, beer, and cocktails, plus the best sports bar, burgers, wings, and ribs. Best value? Old Republic. Another good place to be. Well, we're back for some closing comments after 3 podcasts involving 3 different countywide races. That you know what, I feel pretty good that we got into a lot of different issues here.
I feel fully informed. I really do. I'm glad that we've done this for a personal standpoint, but I hope that the viewers agree with us that they now have information sufficient to go vote.
Now, having said that, let's talk a bit about this particular set of interviews. They were interviews for 2 positions in the judiciary, and I guess I'll say this: I think both candidates are well qualified. I think they showed their credential very well. They're experienced, and I think the bigger question in my mind is this whole idea of what I brought up, the idea that the judiciary is clandestine, it's hidden. And talking off camera with all of us here, we said, as opposed to the governor's race, the mayor's race, the president's race, senator's race, people do not become learned about judiciary candidates in general.
Right.
Why is that?
Well, it takes work. I mean, if you really want to get into it, you could come to the courtrooms, you could watch the judges perform, you could ask questions of, from the staff, the bailiffs, the sheriff's deputies that work security. You can look into the appellate opinions of cases that they presided over. You could do all sorts of things.
Well, yeah, and you, being a lawyer and me teaching law over the years, we've done a lot of that.
Sure.
I've digested numerous court cases, and I've formed opinions about Supreme Court justices, appellate court judges, and even local judges. Right. But the average person, Pat, I don't think does that.
I think of the average person, what they really want in a judge is they want to know that they're going to get a fair shot. And that the powers and the monies and whatever else, the forces out there aren't going to affect their ability to get a fair shot. And I think these 2 judges clearly are the type of judges that are going to give everybody a fair shot.
Oh, I think that their resumes and their dialogue would suggest exactly that. So, we're not here to endorse either one, but to say, I think that the interviews provided you, the listener, with a lot of solid information about what they do, who they are, where they come from.
Right. And my standard, of course, is always, do they remember what it was like to be a lawyer? Do they all of a sudden become a judge and say, hey, counsel, it's 9:01, you're late, that kind of thing, right? Because you have to understand that practicing law, you're in different courtrooms, things happen. You have to have a temperament that allows for that, and you have to remember what it was like.
Well, I'll ask you the same question I asked both of them, though. We really never talked about this that much. So I'll put you on the spot and say, should judges at this level, at least, the circuit court level, the lower court level before appellate level, the courts of trier of fact, should they be appointed? Should they be elected? Or do you have some different system that you think would be better?
Well, other counties, Cook County, I think they do a vetting system where they say that these people have applied and maybe you can, we will have a hearing or you will be allowed to give input as to these names. So the random citizen from 4th Street or 5th Street can say, oh, I know this guy and I don't like him for whatever reason. So it's like open to the public. So they do that. We don't have that here. I think she described the appointment process. There's a complicated questionnaire. There's an interview with the judge's panel, that kind of thing. So there's a process of vetting. It's not the same as an election, and it presupposes that everything's on the level, right? So
What I find to be intriguing, we talk about the judiciary in a broad sense, but we have 50 states and we have a U.S. Supreme Court. We have 50 different state Supreme Courts. There's a variety of ways those justices get to those positions, where there's a 5-person Supreme Court or a 7-person Supreme Court like in Illinois,
Right.
or the U.S. Supreme Court that's 9. We know that the president appoints the U.S. Supreme
Right,
Court.
right.
But it's all over the place in the various states.
I think it's impossible to eliminate what everybody's afraid of, which is the favoritism, the political favoritism. He's my best friend's son or whatever. That kind of stuff. It's hard to eliminate that stuff. And unless it's disclosed, people aren't going to know that that's going on, right? So,
Well,
I don't know what you do about it.
yeah, well, I'll say this. My concluding remark on all this is, we've had interviews with the executive branch, and we've had interviews with the legislative branch. But partner, I'm happy that we
Sure.
took the time to interview the judiciary.
Yeah.
And
As you saw, there's intertwining of all three of those branches, right? They talked about mental health, obviously, today. We've talked a little bit about that.
And if I may, and I know they couldn't opine upon it, so that's why we didn't ask the question.
Sure.
But it would have been interesting if they could opine, to see what they would say about this proposal, which we talked about with the county board chair candidates and the state's attorney candidates, this proposal for a sales tax at the county that would go toward public safety.
Right. Well, I think any judge, if given the opportunity, would say yes for more resources, as long as they're dedicated to things that we need. As Judge Clement said, mental health seems to be an area that needs more resources.
All right, well, if I may pat ourselves on the back, a job well done, I think. And I think our producer even liked what we did here.
I can't speak for him, but I hope the voters, the viewers liked it.
I do too.
I hope they use it as information that is helpful.
And of course, we'll be back with some of this stuff after the first of the year, because there'll be springtime elections as well, and we're not going to shirk our responsibility to try to provide you with information about candidates in the spring elections.
How many of those are there?
Well, I
have
know
to
that
get
we're
my
going to have
sleep
at
before
least
85 podcasts.
3 or 4 mayor's races
Okay.
up and down the valley, and again, we'll see about other races as we get closer.
Are
to
you going
it.
to tell them about the 15? The 15.
So you're
The
getting silly
15
now, folks.
documentary series about the dam that we're going to do. The various
Listen,
dams.
The various dams. Oh, we know that Carpentersville
15 parts.
has taken their dam out.
Now,
Carpentersville has taken it. Let's not get into.
no, what does that mean though? Taking it out, like they're like no longer playing. the
It's
game?
right. It's right. That's right.
Okay.
Please. This is for another day, folks. So it's time to say so long. Early voting starts today.
That's
today
right.
is the 26th. So you have between now and November 5th to cast that ballot. Please cast the ballot.
Regardless of who you're voting for. right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Please cast that ballot. We want to see Kane County with a large percentage turnout in this particular.
And we're not asking for a write-in, or we're not on the ballot. That's clear to everybody.
Clearly not. So, thank you, by the way, to Judges Clement and Parga.
Yes.
I want to thank them. And of course, we do want to thank our crack producer.
Yes.
He's got today he has the Fox Valley Magazine sweatshirt on, which we don't have. We don't have one.
Apparently they wear those for security reasons, as we learned yesterday.
Well, yeah, because our crack cinematographer
fella.
yesterday, he comes in
Hey,
with his
fella.
identification.
What are you doing over
And
here?
Our crack producer today, he has his identification, and of course his traditional bite me hat, which
Right.
I hope that he replaces that, and it looks like he's got to replace it
Everybody
soon.
has a lucky fishing hat.
Well, my wife Diane, we bought one in New Orleans. It's got an alligator on it that says "Bite Me," so she has one like that, and so I'm sure you can find a new one when that thing falls apart.
I don't understand your wife's, what is with the temperament issue here? Why is she so angry? Bite me. What's that all about?
It was just a fun hat. My wife has a temperament of Joan of Arc.
She's a sweet lady. Everybody, I can verify that.
Thank you. And for my sweet partner
Co-host.
and a co-host, Pat Crimmins, Ray Rogina, wishing you all a pleasant weekend. We got football coming
And
up. So we got
September wanes.
September wanes, and well, I'll tell you right
Halloween
now.
season, right?
Before I sign off, I want to say this right now. If the Fighting Illini were to beat Penn State this Saturday, I think we'd get a raise. He'd be so happy.
Oh, you
He'd
think?
be so happy.
He'd be blinded. And
He's blinded by the
check
light,
would be
and the check for October
extra
might
zero.
have well, I don't know about an extra zero, but it might be a different number in there.
That's right.
That's right. But that's what remains to be seen. They're 18-point dogs.
I understand.
So until
Who's an
next
18-point dog? Illinois?
yes.
Oh my gosh, they beat a Nebraska team. It's pretty good.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Paul was stunned by that as well.
right.
Anyway,
We'll get
enough
back to
of that. Go to the window and take Illinois. For Pat and Ray,
Ray and Pat,
it's just a couple of guys. We'll see you soon, like next week. So long, everyone.
next week.